Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen. Force over here and welcome back to another reading live stream. This time I have a glass of tea, a cup of tea with me, so I'll be drinking some of that every so often. Uh, and so, as you can tell from the title, tonight I am reading The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Tonight I will be finally trying once again to read chapters 7 and 8. Like I said before, I was going to do 7, 8, 9, but because of how long the first half of the book, how long the chapters in the first half of the book are, I'm going to, excuse me, I will be waiting until the chapters are a bit shorter to read that third chapter, but we'll get to that when I get to that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and take my glass. Actually, I'm going to clean my glasses a little bit. Hold on a second. Why does it always seem like I gotta note to self? Note to self. Before you do these live streams, make sure your glasses are clean and even the smallest debris before you do this. But anyway, actually, since I am in the middle of cleaning my glasses, I will say this much. By the time this has come out, I'll probably have already done this. But tomorrow, uh, at the time of this recording, it is should be about midnight, I think. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 a.m., Mario Kart the Mario Kart World Direct is supposed to happen. Some people are kind of wondering why it's 15 minutes long. And I'm thinking, well, to be fair, we have some new, they have these new things going in. The only thing we literally don't know outside of everything. Like there's some things that we know more than others, so they'll probably go into that a little bit more detail. But as far as but we also don't know how many what characters will be in the game. So I'll be doing a reaction to that at some point tomorrow, whether it be before I go to work or after I get home from work. We'll see how that goes. Either way, let's begin with The Hobbit, Chapter 7 and 8. Also, because I like to give a little bit of I'm going to be doing this from here on in. When it comes to books that I'm pretty sure are not going to be kid friendly at all, in even the smallest degree. Like, this book may be considered kid friendly, but just to be on the safe side, these chapters that I'm about to read may contain subject matter that may not be suitable for your kids, for your children to hear. If you want to hear these chapters before giving the okay for your child or children to listen to, be my guest. Because at the end of the day, just like you guys, I want to make sure the books that my niece and nephew are reading from mine are age appropriate. And I already know that a number of them are not. But yeah, that's for you guys to decide in that regard. But without further ado, let's begin. Also, if you guys hear any background noise, that's my heater. Chapter 7 Queer Lodgings. The next morning, Bilbo woke up with the early sun in his eyes. He jumped up to look at the time and to go and put his kettle on, and found he was not home at all. So he sat down and wished in vain for a wash and a brush. He did not get either, nor tea, nor toast, nor bacon for his breakfast, only cold mutton and rabbit, and after that he had to get ready for a fresh start. This time he was allowed to climb onto an eagle's back and cling between his wings. The air rushed over him, and he shut his eyes. The dwarves were crying farewells and promising to repay the Lord of the Eagles if ever they could. as off rose 15 great birds from the mountainside. The sun was still close to the eastern edge of things. The morning was cool, and mists were in the valleys and hollows entwined here and there about the peaks and pinnacles of the hills. Bilbo opened an eye to peep and saw that the birds were already high up, and the world was far away, and the mountains were falling back behind them into the distance. He shut his eyes again and held on tighter. Don't pinch, said his eagle. You need not be frightened like a rabbit, even if you look rather like one. It is a fair morning with little wind. What is finer than flying? Bilbo would have liked to say, a warm bath and late breakfast on the lawn afterwards. But he thought it and let go his clutch just a tiny bit. After a good while, the eagles must have seen the point they were making for, even from their great heights, for they began to go down, circling in great spirals. They did this for a long while, and at last the hobbit opened his eyes again. The earth was much nearer, and below them were trees that looked like oaks and elms, and wide grass lands, and a river running through it all. But cropping out of the ground, right in the path of the stream which looped itself about it, was a great rock, almost a hill of stone, like a last outpost of the distant mountains, or a huge piece cast miles into the plain by some giant among giants. Quickly now to the top of this rock the eagles swooped one by one and set down their passengers. Farewell, they cried. Wherever you fare, till your irises receive you at the journey's end. That is a polite thing to say among eagles. May the winds under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks, answered Gandalf, who knew the correct reply. And so they parted. And though the Lord of the Eagles became in after days the king of all birds, and wore a golden crown, and his 15 chieftains golden colors made in the gold that the dwarves gave them, Bilbo never saw them again, except high and far off in the battle of 5 armies. But as that comes to the end of this tale, we will say no more about it for just now. Yeah, we don't want no spoilers. We don't want no early spoilers of the story. Anyway, there was a flat space on the top of the hill of stone, and a well-worn path with many steps leading down it to the river, across which a ford of huge flat stones led to the grassland beyond the stream. There was a little cave, a wholesome one with a pebbly floor, at the foot of the steps and near the end of the stony ford. Here the party gathered and discussed what was to be done. I always meant to see you all safe, if possible, over the mountains, said the wizard. And now, by good management and good luck, I have done it. Indeed, we are now a good deal further east than I ever meant to come with you, for after all this is not my adventure. I may look in on it again before it is all over, but in the meanwhile I have some more other pressing business to attend to. The dwarfs groaned and looked most distressed, and Bilbo wept. They had begun to think Gandalf was going to come all the way and would always be there to help them out of difficulties. I am not going to disappear this very instant, said he. I can give you a day or two more. Probably I can help you out of your present plight, and I need a little help myself. We have no food, and no baggage, and no ponies to ride, and you don't know where you are. Now I can tell you that. You are still some miles north of the path which we should have been following, if we had not left the mountain pass in a hurry. Very few people live in these parts, unless they have come here since I was last down this way, which is some years ago. But there is somebody that I know of who lives not far away. That somebody made the steps on the great rock, the Karak, I believe he calls it. He does not come here often, certainly not in the daytime, and it is no good waiting for him. In fact, it would be very dangerous. We must go and find him, and if all goes well at our meeting, I think I shall be off and wish you like the eagles. Farewell wherever you fare. They begged him not to leave them. They offered him dragon gold and silver and jewels, but he would not change his mind. We shall see, he said, and I think I have earned already some of your dragon gold, when you have got it. Like I always do after every space in the middle, I take a drink. At least that will try to keep me awake. After they had stopped pleading, they took off their clothes and bathed in the river, which was shallow and clear and stony at the ford. When they had dried in the sun, which was now strong and warm, they were refreshed, if still sore and a little hungry. Soon they crossed the ford, carrying the Hobbit, and then began to march through the long green grass and down the lines of the wide-armed oaks and the tall elms. "And why is it called a carrack?" asked Bilbo as he went along at the wizard's side. "He called it a carrock because carrock is his word for it. He calls things like that carrocks, and this one is the carrock because it is the only one near his home, and he knows it well." "Who calls it? Who knows it?" "The somebody I spoke of, a very great person. You must all be very polite when I introduce you. I shall introduce you slowly, two by two, I think. And you must be careful not to annoy him, or heaven knows what will happen. He can be appalling when he is angry, though he is kind enough if humored. Still, I warn you, he gets angry easily." The dwarves all gathered round when they heard the wizard talking like this to Bilbo. Waiting for a moment to see if anything happens. Because my dog just barked. Alright, moving on. "Is that the person you are taking us to now?" they asked. "Couldn't you find someone more easy-tempered? Hadn't you better explain it all a bit clearer?" And so on. "Yes, it certainly is. No, I could not. And I was explaining very carefully," answered the wizard crossly. "If you must know more, his name is Beorn. He is very strong and he is a skin changer." "What? A furrier? A man that calls rabbits connies when he doesn't..." Wait, no, wait, that was Bilbo. Hold on. "What? A furrier? A man that calls rabbits connies when he doesn't turn their skins into squirrels?" asked Bilbo. "Good gracious heavens, no, 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 no!" said Gandalf. "Don't be a fool, Mr. Baggins, if you can help it. And in the name of all the wonder, don't mention the word furrier again as long as you are within 100 miles of his house. Nor rug, cape, tippet, smuff, nor any other such unfortunate word. He is a skin changer. He changes his skin. Sometimes he is a huge black bear. Sometimes he is a great strong black-haired man with huge arms and a great beard. I cannot tell you much more, though that ought to be enough. Some say that he is a bear descended from the great and ancient bears of the mountains that lived there before the giants came. Others say he is a man descended from the first men who lived before Smaug or the other dragons came into this part of the world, and before the goblins came into the hills out of the north. I cannot say, though. I fancy the last is the true tale. He is not the sort of person to ask questions of. At any rate, he is under no enchantment but his own. He lives in an oak wood and has a great wooden house, and as a man he keeps cattle and horses which are nearly as marvelous as himself. They work for him and talk to him. Hold on. Sorry about that. Family member came in. Anyway. Anyway, getting back to the story. They work for him and talk to him. He does not eat them, neither does he hunt or eat wild animals. He keeps hives and hives of great fierce bees, and lives most on cream and honey. As a bear he ranges far and wide. I once saw him sitting all alone on the top of the Karok at night watching the moon sinking towards the misty mountains, and I heard him growl in the tongue of bears. The day will come when they will perish, and I shall go back. That is why I believe he once came from the mountains himself. Hmm. Will we find out about him ourselves? Let's see. Like it's pretty much going to happen that we're going to meet the guy, but we're going to meet him. Like, but I'm curious about his backstory if they even talk about it. Bilbo and the dwarfs had now plenty to think about, and they asked no more questions. They still had a long way to walk before them. Up slope and down dale they plodded. It grew very hot. Sometimes they rested under trees, and then Bilbo felt so hungry that he would have eaten scorns if any had been ripe enough yet to have fallen to the ground. And I said scorns or acorns. Yeah, he would have eaten acorns if any had been ripe enough yet to have fallen to the ground. It was the middle of the afternoon before they noticed the great patches of flowers had begun to spring up, all the same kinds growing together as if they had been planted. Especially there was clover, waving patches of coxcomb, clover and purple clover, and wide stretches of short, white, sweet honey-smelling clover. There was a buzzing and a whirring and a droning in the air. Bees were busy everywhere, and such bees! Bilbo had never seen anything like them. If one was to sting me, he thought, I should swell up as big again as I am. They were bigger than the horn. They were bigger than hornets. The drones were bigger than your thumb, a good deal, and the bands of yellow on their deep black bodies shone like a fiery gold. We are getting near, said Gandalf. We are on the edge of his bee pastures. Hmm. After a while they came to a belt of tall and very ancient oaks, and beyond these to a high thorn hedge through which you could neither see nor scramble. You had better wait here, said the wizard to the dwarves, and when I call or whistle begin to come after me. You will see the way I go, but only in pairs, about 5 minutes between each pair of you. Bulber is fattest, and will do for two. He had better come alone and last. Come on, Mr. Baggins. This is a great somewhere round this way. There's a gate somewhere round this way. And with that he went off along the hedge, taking the frightened hobbit with him. They soon came to a wooden gate, high and broad, beyond which they could see gardens and a cluster of low wooden buildings, some thatched and made of unshaped logs, barns, stables, sheds, and a long, low wooden house. Inside, on the southward side of the great hedge, were rows and rows of hives and with bell-shaped tops made of straw. The noise of the giant bees flying to and fro and crawling in and out filled all the air. The wizard and the hobbit pushed open the heavy creaking gate and went down a wide track towards the house. Some horses, very sleek and well groomed, trotted up across the grass and looked at them intently with very intelligent faces. Then off they galloped to the buildings. They had gone to tell him of the arrival of strangers, said Gandalf. Soon they reached a courtyard, 3 walls of which were formed by the wooden house and its 2 long wings. In the middle there was lying a great oak trunk with many lopped branches beside it. Standing near was a huge man with a thick black beard and hair, and great bare arms and legs with knotted muscles. He was clothed in a tunic of wool down to his knees, and was leaning on a large axe. The horses were standing by him with their noses at his shoulder. Ah, here they are, he said to the horses. They don't look dangerous. You get me off. He laughed a great rolling laugh and put down his axe and came forward. Who are you and what do you want? He asked gruffly, standing in front of them and towering tall above Gandalf. As for Bilbo, he could easily have trotted through his legs without ducking his head to miss the fringe of the man's brown tunic. I am Gandalf, said the wizard. Never heard of him, growled the man. And what's this little fella? He said, stooping down to frown at the hobbit with his bushy black eyebrows. This is Mr. Baggins, a hobbit of good family and unimpeachable reputation, said Gandalf. Bilbo bowed. He had no hat to take off, and was painfully conscious of his many missing buttons. I am a wizard, continued Gandalf. I have heard of you, if you have not heard of me, but perhaps you have heard of my good cousin Radagast, who lives near the southern border of Mirkwood? Yes, not a bad fellow as wizards go, I believe. I used to see him now and again, said Bjorn. Well, now I know who you are, or who you say you are. What do you want? To tell you the truth, we have lost our luggage and nearly lost our way, and are rather in need of help, or at least of advice. I may say we have had rather a bad time with goblins in the mountains. Goblins? Oh, said the big man less gruffly. Oh, so you've been having trouble with them, have you? What did you go near them for? We did not mean to. They surprised us at night in a pass which we had to cross. We were coming out of the lands over west into these countries. It is a long tale. Then you had better come inside and tell me some of it, if it won't take all day, said the man, leading the way through a dark door that opened out of the courtyard into the house. Following him, they found themselves in a wide hall with a fireplace in the middle. Though it was summer, there was a wood fire burning, and the smoke was rising to the blackened rafters in search of the way out through an opening in the roof. They passed through this dim hall, lit only by the fire and the hole above it, and came through another smaller door into a sort of veranda propped on wooden posts made of single tree trunks. It faced south and was still warm and filled with the light of the west westering sun which slammed into it and fell golden on the garden full of flowers that came right up to the steps. Here they sat on the wooden benches while Gandalf began his tale, and Bilbo swung his dangling legs and looked at the flowers in the gardens, wondering what their names could mean, as he had never seen half of them before. I was coming over the mountains with a friend or two, said the wizard. Or two? I can only see one, and a little one at that, said Bjorn. Well, to tell you the truth, I did not like to bother you with a lot of us, until I found out if you were busy. I will give a call if I may. Go on! Go on, call away. So Gandalf gave a long shrill whistle, and presently Thorin and Dori came round the house by the garden path and stood bowing low before them. One or three you meant, I see, said Beorn. But these aren't hobbits, they're dwarves. Thorin Oakenshield at your service. Dori at your service, said the two dwarves bowing again. I don't need your service, thank you, said Bjorn. But I expect you need mine. I am not over fond of dwarves, but if it is true you are, Thorin, son of Thran, son of Thor, I believe, and that your companion is respectable, and that you are enemies of goblins and are not up to any mischief in my lands. What are you up to, by the way? They are on their way to visit the land of their fathers, and away east beyond Mirkwood, put in Gandalf. And it is entirely an accident that we are in your lands at all. We were crossing by the high pass that should have brought us to the road that lies to the south of your country when we were attacked by the evil goblins, as I was about to tell you. Go on telling then, said Bjorn, who was never very polite. There was a terrible storm. The stone giants were out hurling rocks, and at the head of the pass we took refuge in a cave. The Hobbit and I and some of our companions. Forward again, look at this. Look at that artwork. Look at that artwork. Look at artwork. I accidentally almost took the page on the bottom. Moving on. Do you call two several? Well, no. As a matter of fact, there were more than two. Where are they? Killed, eaten, gone home? Well, no. They don't seem all to have come when I whistled. Shy, I expect. You see, we are very much afraid that we are rather a lot for you to entertain. Go on, whistle again. I am in for a party, it seems, and one or two more won't make much difference, growled Bjorn. Gandalf whistled again, but Nori and Ori were there almost before he had stopped. For, if you remember, Gandalf had told them to come in pairs every 5 minutes. Hello! Hello! Said Bjorn. You came pretty quick. Where are you hiding? Come on, my jack in the boxes. Nori at your service. Ori at... They began, but Bjorn interrupted them. Thank you. When I want your help, I will ask for it. Sit down and let's get on with this tale, or it'll be supper time before it is ended. As soon as we were asleep, went on Gandalf, a crack at the back of the cave opened. Goblins came out and grabbed the hobbit and the dwarves and our troop of ponies. Troop of ponies? What were you, a traveling circus? Or were you carrying lots of goods? Or did you always call six a troop? Oh, no. As a matter of fact, there were more than 6 ponies, for there were more than 6 of us. And, well, here are 2 more. Just at that moment, Balin and Dwalin appeared and bowed so low that their beards swept the stone floor. The big man was frowning at first, but they did their best to be frightfully polite and kept on nodding and bending and bowing and waving their hoods before their leaves, in proper dwarf fashion, till he stopped frowning and burst into a chuckling laugh. They looked so comical. Troop was right, he said. A fine comic one. Come in, my merry men, and what are your names? I don't want your service just now, only your names, and then sit down and stop wagging. Boil and Dwalin, they said, not daring to be offended, and sat flop on the floor, looking rather surprised. Now go on again, said Bjorn to the wizard. Where was I? Oh, yes. I was not grabbed. I killed a goblin or two with a flash. Good! growled Bjorn. It is some good being a wizard then. And slipped inside the crack before it closed. I followed down into the main hall, which was crowded with goblins. The great goblin was there with 30 or 40 armed guards. I thought to myself, even if they were not all chained together, what can a dozen do against so many? A dozen! That's a first. I've heard 8 called a dozen. Or have you still got some more jacks that you haven't yet come out of their boxes? Well, yes, there seem to be a couple more here now. Filey and Kylie, I believe, said Gandalf as these two now appeared and stood smiling and bowing. That's enough, said Bjorn. Sit down and be quiet. Now go on, Gandalf. So Gandalf went on with the tale until he came to the fight in the dark, the discovery of the lower gate, and their horror when they found that Mr. Baggins had been mislaid. We counted ourselves and found that there was no Hobbit. There were only 14 of us left. 14! That's the first time I've heard one from 10 leave 14. You mean 9, or else you haven't told me yet all the names of your party. Well, of course you haven't seen Oin and Gloin yet. And bless me, here they are. I hope you will forgive them for bothering you. Oh, let them all come. Hurry up! Come on, you two, and sit down. But look here, Gandalf. Even now we have only got yourself and the 10 dwarves and the hobbit that was lost. That only makes 11, plus 1 mislaid, and not 14, unless wizards count differently to other people. But now, please go on with the tale. Bjorn did not show it more than he could help, but really he had begun to be very interested. You see, in the old days he had known the very part of the mountains that Gandalf was describing. He nodded and he growled when he heard of the hobbits' reappearance, and of their scramble down the stone slide, and of the wolf ring in the woods. When Gandalf came to their climbing on the trees and with the wolves all underneath, he got up and strode about and muttered, I wish I had been there. I would have. I wish I had been there. I would have given them more than fireworks. Well, said Gandalf, very glad to see that his tale was making a good impression, I did the best I could. There were there we were, with the wolves gone mad underneath us, and the forest beginning to blaze in places, when the goblins came down from the hills and discovered us. They yelled with delight and sang songs making fun of us. 15 birds and 5 fir trees. Good heavens, growled Bjorn. Don't pretend the goblins can't count. They can. 12 isn't 15, and they know it. And so do I. There were Bifer and Bofer as well. I haven't ventured to introduce them before, but here they are. In came Bifer and Bofer. And me, gasped Bomber, puffing up behind. He was fat and also angry at being left till last. He refused to wait 5 minutes and followed immediately after the other two. Well, now there are 15 of you, and since goblins can count, I suppose that is all that there is that were up in the trees. Now perhaps we can finish the story without any more interruptions. Mr. Baggins saw then how clever Gandalf had been. The interruptions had really made Bjorn more interested in the story, and the story had kept him from sending the dwarves off at once like suspicious beggars. He had never invited people into his house, if he could help it. He had very few friends, and they lived a good way away, and he never invited more than a couple of them to his house at a time. Now he had got 15 strangers sitting on his porch. By the time the wizard had finished his tale and had told of the eagle's rescue, and of how they had all been brought to the Karok, the sun had fallen behind the peaks of the misty mountains, and the shadows were long in Beorn's garden. A very good tale, said he. The best I've heard for a long while. If all beggars could tell such a good one, they might find me kinder. You may be making it all up, of course, but you deserve a supper for the story all the same. Let's have something to eat. Yes, please, they all said together. Thank you very much. Inside the hall it was now quite dark. Bjorn clapped his hands, and in trotted four beautiful white ponies and several large, long-bodied gray dogs. Bjorn said something to them in a queer language like animal noises turned into talk. They went on it. They went out again and soon came back carrying torches in their mouths, which they lit at the fire and struck in low brackets on the pillars of the hall about the central hearth. The dogs could stand on their hind legs when they wished, and carry things with their 4 feet. Quickly they got out boards and trestles from the side walls and set them up near the fire. Then, wait, hold on, let me do this right. Was heard, and then came some snow-white sheep led by a large coal-black ram. One bore a white cloth embroidered at the edges with figures of animals. Others bore on their broad backs trays with bowls and platters and knives and wooden spoons, which the dogs took and quickly laid on the trestle tables. They were very low enough even for Bilbo to sit at comfortably. Beside them, a pony pushed two low, two low-seated benches with wide rush bottoms and little short thick legs for Gandalf and Thorin, while at the far end he put Bjorn's big black chair of the same sort, in which he sat with his great legs struck far out under the table. These were all the chairs he had in his hall, and he probably had them low, like the tables for the convenience of the wonderful animals that waited on him. What did the rest sit on? They were not forgotten. The other ponies came in, rolling around drum-shaped sections of logs, smothered and polished, and low enough even for Bilbo, so soon they were all seated at Beorn's table, and the hall had not seen such a gathering for many a year. There they had a supper, or a dinner, such as they had not had since they left the last homely house in the west and said goodbye to Elrond. The light of the torches in the fire flickered about them, and on the table were two tall and beeswax candles. All the time they ate, Beorn in his deep rolling voice told tales of the wildlands on this side of the mountains, and especially of the dark and dangerous wood that lay outstretched far to north and south a day's ride before them, barring their way to the east the terrible forest of Mirkwood. The dwarves listened and shook their beards, for they knew that must soon venture into that forest, and that after the mountains it was the worst of the perils they pass before they came to the dragon's stronghold. When dinner was over, they began to tell tales of their own, but Beorn seemed to be growing drowsy and paid little heed to them. They spoke most of gold and silver, and jewels and the making of things by smithcraft, and Beorn did not appear to care for such things. There were no things of gold or silver in his hall, and few save the knives were made of metal at all. They sat long at the table with their wooden drinking bowls filled with mead. The dark night came on outside. The fires in the middle of the hall were built with fresh logs, and the torches were put out, and still they sat in the light of the dancing flames, with the pillars of the house standing tall behind them, and dark at the top of like trees of the forest. Whether it was a magic or not, it seemed to Bilbo that he heard a sound like wind in the branches stirring in the rafters, and the hoot of owls. Soon he began to nod with sleep, and the voices seemed to grow far away, until he woke with a start. The great door had creaked and slammed. Beorn was gone. The dwarves were sitting cross-legged on the floor round the fire, and presently They began to sing. Some of the verses were like this, but there were many more, and their singing went on for a long while. I'm gonna have to start doing this song, this in the style that I usually do. So, fair warning, I may not be a good singer, but I'm gonna try. Let's see. Okay, let's do it. The wind was on the withered hearth, but in the forest stirred no leaf. Their shadows, their shadows lay by night and day, and dark things silent crept beneath. The wind came down from mountains cold, and like a tide it roared and rolled. The branches groaned, the forest moaned, and leaves were laid upon the mould. The wind the wind went on from west to east, all movement in the forest ceased. But shrill and harsh across the marsh, its whistling voices were released. The grasses hissed, the tassels bent, the reeds were rattling, on it went. Oars shaken full under. Oh, let me do that bit again. I want to do that third verse again. Hold on. The grasses hissed, their tassels bent, the reeds were rattling, on it went. O'er shaken full under heaven's cool, where racing clouds were torn and rent. It passed the slow, it passed the lonely mountain bare, it swept above the dragon's lair. There black and dark lay boulders stark, and flying smoke was in the air. It left the world and took its flight over the wide seas of the night. The moon the moon set sail upon the gale, and stars were formed to leaping light. I'm not gonna actually try to sing, I'm just doing it in a way that would make it go with the beat. Anyway, Bilbo began to nod again. Suddenly up stood Gandalf. "It is time for us to sleep," he said. "For us, but not, I think, for Beorn. In this hall we can rest sound and safe, but I warn you all not to forget what Beorn said before he left us. You must not stray outside until the sun is up, on your peril." Bilbo found that beds had already been laid at the side of the hall on a sort of raised platform between the pillars and the outer wall. For him there was a little mattress of straw and woolen blankets. He snuggled into them very gladly, summertime though it was. The fire burned low and he fell asleep. Yet in the night he woke. The fire had now sunk to a few embers. The dwarves and Gandalf were all asleep. To judge by their breathing, a splash of white on the floor came from the high moon, which was peering down through the smoke hole in the roof. There was a growling sound outside, and a noise as of some great animal scuffling at the door. Bilbo wondered what it was, and whether it could be Beorn in enchanted shape, and if he would come in as a bear and kill them. He dived under the blankets and hid his head, and fell asleep again at last in spite of his fears. It was full morning when he awoke. One of the dwarfs had fallen over him in the shadows where he lay, and had rolled down with a bump from the platform onto the floor. It was Bolfer, and he was grumbling about it when Bilbo opened his eyes. "Get up, get up, lazy bones," he said, "or there will be no breakfast left for you." Up jumped Bilbo. "Breakfast!" he cried. "Where is breakfast?" "Mostly inside us," answered the other dwarfs, who were moving down the hall. "But what is left is out in the veranda. We have been out looking for Beorn ever since the sun got up, but there is no sign of him anywhere, though we found breakfast late as soon as we went out. Where is Gandalf? Asked Bilbo, moving off to find something to eat as quickly as he could. Oh, out and about somewhere, they told him, but he saw no sign of the wizard at all that day until the evening. Just before sunset, he walked into the hall, where the hobbit and the dwarves were having supper, waited on by Beorn's wonderful animals, as they had been all day. Of Beorn they had seen and heard nothing since the night before, and they were getting puzzled. "Where's our host, and where have you been all day yourself?" they all cried. "One question at a time, and none till after supper. I haven't had a bite since breakfast." At last Gandalf pushed away his plate and jug. He had eaten 2 whole loaves, with masses of butter and honey and clotted cream, and drunk at least a quart of mead, and he took out his pipe. "I will answer the second question first," he said. "But bless me! This is a splendid place for smoke rings." Indeed, for a long time they could get nothing more out of him. He was so busy setting smoke rings, dodging round the pillars of the hall, changing them into all sorts of different shapes and colors, and setting them at last chasing from one another out of the hole in the roof. They must have looked very queer from outside, popping out into the air one after the another. Green, blue, red, silver, gray, yellow, white, big little ones dodging through big ones and joining into figure eights, and going off like a flock of birds into the distance. "I have been picking up bear tracks," he said at last. "There must have been a regular bears meeting outside here late last night. I soon saw that Beorn could not have made them all. There were far too many of them, and there were various sizes too. I should say there were little bears, large bears, ordinary bears, and gigantic big bears, all dancing outside from dark to nearly dawn. They came from almost every direction, except from the west over the river, from the mountains. In that direction only one set of footprints led, none com- none coming, only one going away from here. I followed those as far as the Karok. There they disappeared into the river, but the water was too deep and strong beyond the rock for me to cross. It is easy enough, as you remember, to get from this bank to the Karok by the ford, but on the other side is a cliff standing up from a swirling channel. I had to walk miles before I found a place where the river was wide and shallow enough for me to wade and swim, and then miles back again to pick up the tracks again. By that time it was too late for me to follow them far. They went straight off into the direction of the pine woods on the east side of the Misty Mountains, where we had our pleasant little party with the Warrens the night before last. And now I think I have answered your first question too, added Gandalf, and he sat a long while silent. Bilbo thought he knew what the wizard meant. "What shall we do?" he cried. "If he leads all the wargs and the goblins down here, we shall all be caught and killed. I thought you said he was not a friend of theirs." "So I did." "And don't be silly. You had better go to bed. Your wits are sleepy." The hobbit felt quite crushed, and as there seemed nothing else to do, he did go to bed. And while the dwarves were still singing songs, he dropped he dropped to sleep, still puzzling his little head about Beorn, still till he dreamed a dream of hundreds of black bears dancing slow, heavy dances round and round in the moonlight in the courtyard. There he woke up when everyone else was asleep, and he heard the same scraping, snuffling, and growling as before. Next morning they were all wakened by Beorn himself. So here you all are still," he said. He picked up the hobbit and laughed. "Not eaten up by wolves or goblins or wicked bears yet, I see. You and he poked Mr. Baggins' waistcoat most disrespectfully. Little bunny is getting nice and fat again on bread and honey, he chuckled. Come and have some more. So they all went to breakfast with him. Bjorn was most jolly for a change. Indeed, he seemed to be in a splendidly good humor, and set them all laughing with his funny stories. Nor did they have to wonder long where he had been or why he was so nice to them, for he told them himself. He had been over the river and right back up into the mountains, from which you can guess that he could travel quickly, in bear shape at any rate. From the burnt wolf glade he had soon found out that part of the story was true, but he had found more than that. He had caught a warg and a goblin wandering into the woods. From there he had got news. The goblin patrols were still hunting with wargs for the dwarves, and they were fiercely angry because of the death of the great goblin, and also because of the burning of the chief wolf's nose and the death from the wizard's fire of many of his chief servants. So much they had told him when he forced them, but he guessed there was more wickedness than this afoot, and that a great raid of the whole goblin army, with their wolf allies, into the lands shadowed by the mountains might soon be made to find the dwarfs, or to take vengeance on the men and the creatures that lived there, and who they thought must be sheltering them. It was a good story, that of yours, said Bjorn, but I like it still better now I am sure it is true. You must forgive my not taking your word. If you lived near the edge of Mirkwood, you would take the word of no one that you did not know as well as your brother or better. As it is, I can only say that I have hurried home as fast as I could to see that you are safe, and offer you any help that I can. I shall think more kindly of dwarves after this. Kill the great goblin! Kill the great goblin! He chuckled fiercely to himself. What did you do with the goblin in the ward? Asked Bilbo suddenly. Come and see! Hold up a second. Let's see if my thing doesn't act up. Anyway. Come and see, said Beorn, and they followed round the house. A goblin's head was stuck outside the gate, and the warg skin was nailed to a tree just beyond. Beorn was a fierce enemy, but now he was their friend, and Gandalf thought it wise to tell him their whole story and the reason of their journey, so that they could get the most help he could offer. This is what he promised to do for them. He would provide ponies for each of them, and a horse for Gandalf, for their journey to the forest, and he would lade them with food to last them for weeks with care, and packed so as to be as easy as possible to carry. Nuts, flour, sealed jars of dried fruits, and red earthenware pots of honey, and twice baked cakes that would keep good a long time, and on a little of which they could march far. The making of these was one of his secrets, but honey was in them, as in most of his foods, and they were good to eat, though they made one thirsty. Water, he said, they would not need to carry this side of the forest, for there were streams and springs along the road. But your way through Mirkwood is dark, dangerous, and difficult, he said. Water is not easy to find there, nor food. The time has not yet come for nuts, though it may be past and gone indeed before you get to the other side. And nuts are about all that grows there fit for food. In there are the in there the wild things are dark, queer, and savage. I will provide you with skins for carrying water, and I will give you some bows and arrows. But I doubt very much whether anything you find in Mirkwood will be wholesome to eat or to drink. There is one stream there, I know, black and strong, which crosses the path. There you should neither drink of nor bathe in, for I have heard that it carries enchantment and a great drowsiness and forgetfulness. And in the dim shadows of that place, I didn't think you will shoot anything, wholesome or unwholesome, without straying from the path. that you must not do for any reason. That is all the advice I can give you. Beyond the edge of the forest, I cannot help you much. You must depend you must depend on your own luck and your courage and the food I send with you. At the gate of the forest, I must ask that you send back my horse and my ponies. But I wish you all speed, and my horse is open to you if ever you come back this way again. Sorry. Moving on. They thanked him, of course, with many bows and sweepings of their hoods, and with many an "At your service, O master of the wide wooden halls." But their spirits sank at his grave words, and they all felt that the adventure was far more dangerous than they had thought, while all the time, even if they passed all the perils of the road, the dragon was waiting at the end. All that morning they were busy with preparations. Soon after midday they ate with Bjorn for the last time, and after the meal they mounted the steeds he was lending them, and bidding him many farewells, they rode off through his gate at a good pace. As soon as they left him, as soon as they left his high hedges at the east of his fenced lands, they turned north and then bore to the northwest. By his advice, they were no longer making for the main forest road to the south of his land. Had they followed the path would have led them down a stream from the mountains that join the great river miles south of the Karak. At that point, there was a deep ford which they might have passed if they had still had their ponies, and beyond that a track led to the skirts of the wood and to the entrance of the old forest road. But Beorn had warned them that way was now often used by the goblins, while the forest road itself, he had heard, was overgrown and disused at the eastern end and led to impassable marshes where the paths had long been lost. Its eastern opening had always been far to the south of the lonely mountain, and would have left them still with a long and difficult northward march when they got to the other side. North of the Karak, the edge of Mirkwood drew closer to the borders of the great river, and though here the mountains too drew down nearer, Bjorn advised them to take this way, for as a place a few days' ride due north of the Karak was the great of little known pathway through Mirkwood that led almost straight towards the lonely mountains. Excuse me. The goblins, Bjorn had said, will not dare to cross the great river for 100 miles north of the Karak, nor to come near my house. It is well protected at night, but I should ride fast, for if they make their raid soon, they will cross the river to the south and scour all the edge of the forest so as to cut you off, and wargs run swifter than ponies. Still, you are safer going north, even though you seem to be going back nearer to their strongholds, for that is what they will least expect, and they will have the longer ride to catch you. Be off now as quick as you may. That is why they were now riding in silence, galloping wherever the ground was grassy and smooth, with the mountains dark on their left, and in the distance the line of the river with its trees drawn ever closer. The sun had only just turned west when they started. Until evening it lay golden on the land about them. It was difficult to think of pursuing goblins behind, and when they had put many miles between them and Bjorn's house, they began to talk and to sing again, and to forget the dark forest path that lay in front. But in the evening, when the dark came on and the peaks of the mountains glowered against the sunset. They made a camp and set a guard, and most of them slept uneasily with dreams in which there came the howl of hunting wolves and the cries of goblins. Still, the next morning dawned bright and fair again. There was an autumn-like upon mist white upon the ground, and the air was chill. But soon the sun rose red in the east, and the mists vanished. And while the shadows were still long, they were off again. So they rode now for 2 more days, and all the while they saw nothing save grass and flowers and birds and scattered trees, and occasionally small herds of red deer browsing or sitting at noon in the shade. Sometimes Bilbo saw the horns hard, of the hart stalking up out of the long grass, and at first he thought they were the dead branches of trees. That third evening they were so eager to press on, for Beorn had said that they should reach the forest gate early on the fourth day, that they rode still forward after dusk and into the night beneath the moon. As the light faded, Bilbo thought he saw away to the right or to the left the shadowy form of a great bear prowling along in the same direction. But if he dared to mention it to Gandalf, the wizard only said, "Hush! Take no notice." Next day they started before dawn, though their night had been short. As soon as it was light, they could see the forest coming as it were to meet them, or waiting for them like a black and frowning wall before them. The land began to slope up and up, and it seemed to be the Hobbit that a silence began to draw in upon them. Birds began to sing less. There were no more deer, not even rabbits were to be seen. By the afternoon they had reached the eaves of Mirkwood, and were resting almost beneath the great overhanging boughs of its outer trees. Their trunks were huge and gnarled, their branches twisted, their leaves were dark and long. Ivy grew on them and trailed along the ground. "Well, here is Mirkwood," said Gandalf, "the greatest of the forests of the northern world. I hope you like the look of it. Now you must send back these excellent ponies you have borrowed." The dwarves were inclined to grumble at this, but the wizard told them they were fools. "Beorn is not as far off as you seem to think, and you had better keep your promises anyway, for he is a bad enemy. Mr. Baggins's eyes are Mr. Baggins's eyes are sharper than yours. If you have not seen each night after dark a great bear going along with us or sitting far off into the moon watching our camps, not only to guard you and guide you, but to keep an eye on the ponies too. Beorn may be your friend, but he loves his animals as his children. You do not guess what kindness he has shown you in letting dwarves ride them to far and so fast, nor what would happen to you if you tried to take them into the forest." "What about the horse then?" said Thorn. "You don't mention sending that back." "I don't, because I am not sending it." "What about your promise then?" "I will look after that. I am not sending the horse back, I am riding it." There they knew that Gandalf was going to leave them at the very edge of Mirkwood, and they were in despair. But nothing they could say would change his mind. "Now we had this all out before when we landed on the Carrock," he said. "It is no use arguing. I have, as I told you, some pressing business away south, and I am already late though bothering with you people. We may meet again before all is over, and then again, of course, we may not. That depends on your luck and on your courage and sense, and I am sending Mr. Baggins with you. I have told you before that he has more about him than you guess, and you will find him out before long. So cheer up, Bilbo, and don't look so glum. Cheer up, Thorin and company. This is your expedition after all. Think of the treasure at the end, and forget the forest and the dragon at any rate until tomorrow morning. When tomorrow morning came, he still said the same. So now there was nothing left to do but to fill their water skins at a clearing spring they found close to the forest gate, and unpack the ponies. They distributed the package as fairly as they could, though Bilbo thought his lot was wearisomely heavy, and did not at all like the idea of trudging for miles and miles with all that on his back. Don't you worry, said Thorin. It'll get lighter all too soon. Before long I expect we shall all wish our packs heavier, and when the food begins to run short. Then at last they said goodbye to their ponies and turned their heads for home. Off they trotted gaily, seeming very glad to put their tails towards the shadow of Mirkwood. As they went away, Bilbo could have swore that a thing like a bear left the shadow of the trees and shambled off quickly after them. Now Gandalf too said farewell. Bilbo sat on the ground feeling very unhappy and wishing he was beside the wizard, on his tall horse. He had gone just inside the forest after breakfast, a very poor one, and it had seemed dark in there in the morning as at night, and very secret, a sort of watching and waiting feeling, he said to himself. Goodbye, said Gandalf to Thorin, and goodbye to you all. Goodbye! Straight through the forest is your way now. Don't stray off the track. If you do, it is 1,000 to 1 you will never find it again, and never get out of Mirkwood, and then I don't suppose I or anyone else will ever see you again. Do we really have to go through? Groaned the hobbit. Yes, you do, said the wizard. If you want to get to the other side, you must either go through or give up your quest. And I am not going to allow you to back out now, Mr. Baggins. I am ashamed of you for thinking of it. You have got to look after all these dwarves for me. He laughed. No, no, said Bilbo. I didn't mean that. I meant, is there no way round? There is, if you care to go 200 miles or so out of your way north, and twice that south. But you wouldn't get a safe path even then. There are no safe paths in this part of the world. Remember, you are over the edge of the wild now, and in for all sorts of fun wherever you go. Before you could get round Mirkwood in the north, you would be right among the slopes of the great mountains, and they are simply stiff with goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs of the worst description. Before you could get round it in the south, you would get into the land of the necromancer, and even you, Bilbo, won't need me to tell you tales of that black sorcerer. I don't advise you to go anywhere near the places overlooked by his dark tower. Stick to the forest track, keep up your keep your spirits up, hope for the best, and with a tremendous silent slice of luck, you may come out one day and see the long marshes lying below you, and beyond them, high in the east, the lonely mountain where dear old Smaug lives, though I hope he is not expecting you. Very comforting you are, to be sure, growled Thorn. Goodbye! If you won't come with us, you had better get off without any more talk. Goodbye, then, and really goodbye, said Gandalf, and he turned his horse and rode down into the west. But he could not resist the temptation to have the last word. Before he had passed quite out of hearing, he turned and put his hands to his mouth and called to them. They heard his voice come faintly. Goodbye! Be good! Take care of yourselves! And don't leave the path! Then he galloped away and was soon lost to sight. Oh, goodbye and go away! Grunted the dwarfs, all the more angry because they were really filled with dismay at losing him. Now began the most dangerous part of all the journey. They each shouldered the heavy pack, and the water skin which was their share, and turned from the light that lay on the lands outside and plunged into the forest. Hmm. Oh, this will be interesting. Alright, this will be a bit of a long read, but it is what it is, alright. Alright. Chapter 8 Flies and Spiders. They walked in single file. The entrance to the path was like a sort of arch leading into a gloomy tunnel made by two great trees that leaned together, too old and strangled with ivy and hung with lichen to bear more than a few blackened leaves. The path itself was narrow and wound in and out among the trunks. Soon the light at the gate was like a little bright hole far behind, and the quiet was so deep that their feet seemed to thump along while all the trees leaned over them and listened. As their eyes became used to the dimness, they could see a little way to either side in in a sort of darkened green glimmer. Occasionally, a slender beam of sun that had the luck to slip in and through some opening in the leaves far above, and still more luck in not being caught in the tangled boughs and matters. Twigs beneath stabbed down thin and bright before them. But this was seldom, and it soon ceased altogether. Hmm. This should have probably wait a second. There were black squirrels in the wood. As Bilbo's sharp, inquisitive eyes got used to seeing things, he could catch glimpses of them whisking off the path and scuttling behind tree trunks. There were queer noises, too, grunts, scufflings, and hurryings in the undergrowth and among the leaves that lay piled endlessly thick in places on the forest floor. But what made the noises he could not see. The nastiest things they saw were the cobwebs, dark, dense cobwebs with threads extraordinarily thick, often stretched from tree to tree, or tangled in the lower branches on either side of them. There were none stretched across the path, but whether because some magic kept it clear, or for what other reason, they could not guess. It was not long before they grew to hate the forest as heartily as they had hated the tunnels of the goblins, and it seemed to offer even less hope of any ending. But they had to go on and on, long after they were sick for a sight of the sun and of the sky, and longed for the feel of wind on their faces. There was no movement of air down under the forest roof, and it was everlastingly still and dark and stuffy. Even the dwarfs felt it, who were used to tunneling and lived at times for long whiles without the light of the sun. But the hobbit, who liked holes to make a house in, but not to spend summer days in, felt that he was being slowly suffocated. The nights were the worst. It then became pitch dark. Not what you call pitch dark, but really pitch, so black that you really could see nothing. Bilbo tried flapping his hand in front of his nose, but he could not see it at all. Well, perhaps it is not true to say that they could see nothing. They could see eyes. They slept all closely huddled together and took it in turns to watch, and when it was Bilbo's turn, he would see gleams in the darkness round them, and sometimes pairs of yellow or red or green eyes would stare at him from a little distance, and then slowly fade and disappear, and slowly shine out again in another place. And sometimes they would gleam down from the branches just above him, and that was most terrifying. But the eyes that he liked the least were horrible, pale, bulbous sort of eyes. Insect eyes, he thought. Not animal eyes, only they are much too big. Hmm. Although it was not yet very cold, they tried lighting watchfires at night, but they soon gave that up. It seemed to bring hundreds of eyes all round them, and though the creatures, whatever they were careful never let it brought thousands of never to let their bodies show in the little flicker of the flames. Worse still, it brought thousands of dark gray and black moths, so nearly as big as your hand, flapping and round their whirring round their ears. It could not stand them, not the huge bats, black as a top hat, either. So they gave up fires, and sat at night, and dozed in the enormous, uncanny darkness. All this went on for what seemed to be to the Hobbit ages upon ages, and he was always hungry for they were extremely careful with their provisions. Even so, as days followed days, and still the forest seemed just the same, they began to get anxious. The food would not last forever. It was in fact already beginning to get low. They tried shooting at the squirrels, and they wasted many arrows before they managed to bring one down on the path. But when they roasted it, it proved horrible to taste, and they shot no more squirrels. They were thirsty too, for they had none too much water, and in all the time they had seen neither spring nor stream. This was their state when one day they found their path blocked by a running water. It flowed fast and strong, but not very wide right across the way, and it was black, or looked it in the gloom. It was well that Bjorn had warned them against it, or they would have drunk from it, whatever its color, and felt some of their emptied skins at its bank. As it was, they only thought of how to cross it without wetting themselves in its water. There had been a bridge of wood across, but it had rotted and fallen, leaving only the broken posts near the bank. Bilbo, kneeling on the brink and peering forward, cried, "There is a boat against the far bank! Now why couldn't it have been this side?" "How far away do you think it is?" asked Thorin, for by now they knew Bilbo had the sharpest eyes among them. "Not at all far. I shouldn't think about 12 yards." "12 yards! I should have thought it was 30 at least. But my eyes don't see as well as they used 100 years ago. Still, 12 yards is as good as a mile. We can't jump it, and we daren't try to wade or swim. Could any of you throw a rope?" "What's the good of that? The boat is sure to be tied up, even if we could hook it, which I doubt." "I don't believe it is tied," said Bilbo, "though of course I can't be sure in this light, but it looks to me as if it was just drawn up on the bank, which is low just there when the path goes down into the water. Dory is the strongest, but Filey is the youngest and still has the best sight," said Thorin. "Come over here, Filey, and see if you can see the boat Mr. Baggins is talking about." Filey thought he could, so when he had stared a long while to get an idea of the direction, the others brought him a rope. They had several with them, and on the end of the longest they fastened one of the large iron hooks they had used for catching their packs to the straps and about their shoulders. Filey took this in hand, balanced it for a moment, and then flung it across the stream. Splash! It fell in the water. "Not far enough," said Bilbo, who was peering forward. "A couple of feet, and you would have dropped it on to the boat. Try again. I don't suppose the magic is strong enough to hurt you. If you just touch a bit of wet rope. Finally picked up the hook when he had drawn it back, rather doubtfully at the same, all the same. This time he threw it with great strength. Steady, said Bilbo. You have thrown it right into the wood on the other side now. Draw it back gently. Finally he hauled the rope back slowly, and after a while Bilbo said, Carefully! It is lying on the boat, so let's hope the hook will catch. It did. The rope went taut, and finally pulled in vain. Kylie came to his help, and then Owen and Gloin. They tugged and tugged, and suddenly they all fell over on their backs. Bilbo was on the lookout, but however caught the rope, and with a piece of stick fended off the little black boat as it came rushing across the stream. Help! He shouted, and Balin was just in time to see the boat before it floated off down the current. It was tight after all, said he, looking at the snapped painter that was still dangling from it. That was a good pull, my lads, and a good job that our rope was the stronger. Who will cross first? Asked Bilbo. I shall, said Thorin. And you will come with me, and finally, and Balin. There's as many as the boat will hold at a time. After that, Kylie and Oin and Gloin and Dory, next Ori and Nori, Bifer and Bofer, and last Dwalin and Bomber. I'm always last, and I don't like it, said Bomber. It's somebody else's turn today. You should not be so far. As you are, you must be with the last and lightest boatload. Don't start grumbling against orders, or something bad will happen to you. Those aren't orders. How are you going to push the boat back to the far bank? Asked the Hobbit. Wait, those aren't orders. How are you going to push the boat back to the far bank? Asked the Hobbit. Give me another length of rope and another hook, said Filey. And when they had got it ready, he he thrust it into the darkness ahead, and as high as he could throw it. Since it did not fall down again, they saw that it must have stuck in the branches. Get in now, said Filey. And one of you hold on the rope that is stuck in a tree on the other side. One of the others must keep hold of the hook we used at first, and when we are safe on the other side, you can hook it on, and you can draw the boat back. In that way, they were all soon on the far bank safe, across the enchanted stream. Dwalin had just scrambled out of the coiled rope on his arm, and Bomber, still grumbling, was getting ready to follow, when something bad did happen. There was a flying sound of hooves on the path ahead. Out of the gloom came suddenly the shape of a flying deer. It charged into the dwarves and bowled them over, then gathered itself for a leap. High it sprang and cleared the water with a mighty jump, but it did not reach the other side in the safety. Thorn Thorn was the only one who had kept his feet and his wits. As soon as they had landed, he had bent his bow and fitted an arrow in the case. Any hidden guardian of the boat appeared. Now he sent a swift and sure shot leap, into the leaping beast. As it reached the further bank, it stumbled. The shadows swallowed it up, but they heard the sound of hooves quickly falter and then go still. Before they could shout in praise of the shot, however, its a dreadful wail from Bilbo put altogether all thoughts of venison out of their minds. Bulmer has fallen in! Bulmer is drowning! He cried. It was only too true. Bulmer had only 1 foot on the land when the heart bore when the heart bore down on him and sprang over him. He had stumbled, thrusting the boat away from the bank, and then toppled back into the dark water, his hands slipping off the slimy roots at the edge, while the boat span slowly off and disappeared. They could still see his hood above the water when they ran to the bank. Quickly, they flung a rope with a hook towards him. His hand caught it, and they pulled him to the shore. He was drenched from hair to boots, of course, but that was not the worst. When they laid him on the bank, he was already fast asleep, with one hand clutching the rope so tight that they could not get it from his grasp, and fast asleep he remained in spite of all they could do. They were still standing over him, cursing their ill luck, and Balmer's clumsiness, lamenting the loss of the boat, which made it impossible for them to go back and look for the heart, when they became aware of the dim blowing of horns in the wood and the sound as of dogs baying far off. Then they all felt silent, and as they sat it seemed they could hear the noise of a great hunt going by to the north of the path, though they saw no sign of it. There they sat for a long while and did not dare to make a move. Palmer slept on with a smile on his fat face, as if he no longer cared for all the troubles that vexed them. Suddenly on the path ahead appeared some white deer, a hind and fawns as snowy white as the heart had been dark. They glimmered in the shadows. Before Thorin could cry out, three of the dwarves had leaped to their foot and loosed off around arrows from their bows. None seemed to find their mark. The deer turned and vanished in the trees as silently as they had come, and in vain the dwarves shot their arrows after them. Stop! Stop! Shouted Thorin, but it was too late. The excited dwarves had wasted their last arrows, and now the boys the Bard had given them were useless. They were a gloomy party that night, and the gloom gathered all still deeper on them in the following days. They had crossed the enchanted stream, but beyond it the path seemed to struggle on just as before, and in the forest they could see no change. Yet if they had known more about it and considered the meaning of the hunt and the white deer that has appeared upon their path, they would have known that they were at last drawing towards the eastern edge, and would soon have come, if there would could have been if they could have kept up their courage and their hope to thinner trees and the places where the sunlight came again. But they did not know this, and they were burdened with the heavy body of Bomber, which they had to carry along with them as best they could, taking the one wearisome task in turns of four, each while the others shared their packs. If these had not become all too light in the last few days, they would never have managed it. But a slumbering and smiling Bomber was a poor exchange for packs full with food, however heavy. In a few days, in a few days, a time machine. Wait, yeah. In a few days, a time came when there was practically nothing left to eat or drink. Nothing wholesome nothing wholesome could they see growing in the wood. Only funguses and herbs with pale leaves and unpleasant smell. About 4 days from the enchanted stream, they came to a part where most of the tree were beeches. They were at fire and they were at first inclined to be cheered by the change, for here there was no undergrowth and as the shadow was not so deep. There was a greenish light about them, and in places they could see some distance to either side of the path. Yet the light only showed them endless lines of straight gray trunks, like the pillars of some huge twilight hall. There was a breath of air and a noise of wind, but it had a sad sound. A few leaves came rustling down to remind them that an outside autumn was coming on. Their feet ruffled among dead, t- the dead leaf, the dead leaves of countless other autumns that drifted over the banks of the path from the deep red carpets of the forest. So, still, bombers slept and they grew very weary. At times they heard disquieting laughter. Sometimes there was seen in the distant voice, too. The laughter was the laughter of fair voices, not all goblins, and the singing was beautiful, not it sounded eerie and strange, and these were not comforted, but rather they hurried on they hurried on from those parts with what strength they had left. 2 days later, they found their path going downwards, and before long they were in a valley filled almost entirely with the mighty growth of oaks. Is there no end to this accursed fortune? Said Thorn. Somebody must climb a tree and see if he can get his hands on above the roof and look have a look around. The only way is to choose the tallest memory in that the tallest tree that overhangs the path. Hmm. Of course, somebody meant Bilbo. They chose him because of the Mayan use the climber must put his head above the topmo- topmost le- the topmost leaves, and so he must be uh, light enough for the highest and slippiest branches to ever ban him. Poor Mr. Baggins had never had much practice in climbing trees, but they holstered him up into the lower branches of the enormous oak that grew right out of the path, and used up his had to go as best he could. He pushed his way through the tangled twigs with many a slap in the eyes. He was greatly appreciated from the old bark of the greatest bows. More than once he slipped and caught himself some just in time, and at last, after a dreadful struggle in a different place where they seemed to be only one uh, be no convenient brainwashes at all, he dropped me near the top. All the time he was wondering whether or not there, uh, whether these three were spiders in the tree, and know he's going to uh, get down again, except by falling. Hmm. In the end, he poked his head about above the roof of leaves, and then he found spiders all right, but they were only small ones of ordinary life, and then they were after the butterflies. Bilbo's eyes were nearly blinded by the sky. He could bear, he could hear the dwarves shouting up at him from below, but he could not answer, only holding on and blink. The sun was shining brightly like brilliantly, and it was a long while before he could bear it. He could he saw all round him a sea of dark uh, oh great, now we're at the part where I kind of lost my place. Hold on a second. I'll just read that paragraph over. Also going to get me a drink because I can feel the tiredness coming. If I have to. If I have to, would you guys be alright if I found a stopping point to read and then we continue the rest of the chapter on the next part? And so that way it'd be still technically 2 chapters. This would have to be 1.5 because of that if we were to do that. And then like 2.5 for the next part to kind of make up for that. But I'll leave that up to you guys. I'll still read, but yeah, that's my thought. Hmm. Let's see here. Alright, let's see. You know what, I think I'll probably go ahead and do that. So I'll stop right at, not here, but I'll stop on this bit right there. Alright. Because I am starting to feel tired, and I'm already partway through the story, this chapter, so we're going to do that. Anyway. But they did not know. Well, actually, I'll go ahead and read the first paragraph of the paragraph that the page started, so that way it'd be better. Uh, so that way, yeah. Anyway. But they did not know this, and they were burdened with the heavy body of Bomber, which they had to carry along with them as best they could, taking the wearisome task in turns of 4, each while the others shared their packs. If these had not become all too light in the last few days, they would never have managed it. But a slumbering and smiling Bomber was a poor exchange for packs filled with food, however heavy. In a few days, a time came when there was practically nothing left to eat or to drink. Nothing wholesome could they see growing in the wood, only funguses and herbs with pale leaves and unpleasant smell. About 4 days from the enchanted stream, they came to a part where most of the trees wore beeches. They were at first inclined to be cheered by the change, for here there was no undergrowth and the shadow was not so deep. There was a greenish light about them, and in places they could see some distance to either side of the path. Yet the light only showed them endless lines of straight gray trunks like the pillars of some huge twilight hall. There was a breath of air and a noise of wind, but it had a sad sound. A few leaves came rustling down to remind them that outside autumn was coming on. Their feet ruffled among the dead leaves of countless other autumns that drifted over the banks of the path through the deep red carpets of the forest. Still, bombers slept and they grew very weary. At times they heard disquieting laughter. Sometimes there was still in the distance strange. They locked hearts with what strength they had left. Later they found their path going downwards, and before long they were in a valley filled almost entirely with a mighty growth of oaks. "Is there no end to this accursed forest?" said Thorn. "Somebody must climb a tree and see if he can get his head above the roof and have a look around. The only way is to choose the tallest tree that overhangs the path." Of course, somebody meant Bilbo. They chose him because to be of any use the climber must get his head above the topmost leaves, and so he must be light enough for the highest and slenderest of branches to bear him. Poor Mr. Baggins had never had much practice in climbing trees, but they hoisted him up into the lower branches of an enormous oak that grew right on into the path, and up he had to go as best he could. He pushed his way through the tangled winged twigs with many a slap in the eye. He was grimed and grimed from the old grimed from the old bark of the greater boughs. More than once he slipped and caught himself just in time, And at last, after a dreadful struggle in a difficult place where there seemed to be no convenient branches at all, he got near the top. All the time he was wondering whether there were spiders in the tree and how he was going to get down again, except by falling. But in the end, he poked his head above the roof of of leaves, and then he found spiders all right. He found spiders all right, but they were only small ones of ordinary size, and they were after the butterflies. Bilbo's eyes were nearly blind by the light. He could hear the dwarves shouting up at him from far below, but he could not answer, only hold on and blink. The sun was shining brilliantly, and it was a long while before he could bear it. When he could, he saw all round him a sea of dark green, ruffled here and there by the breeze, and there were everywhere hundreds of butterflies. I expect they were a kind of purple emperor, but a butterfly that loves the tops of oak woods. But these were not people at all. They were a dark velvety black without any markings to be seen. He looked at the black emperors for a long time, and enjoyed the feel of the breeze in his hair and on his face. But at length the cries of the dwarfs, who were now simply stamping with impatience down below, reminded him of his real business. It was no good. Gaze as much as he might, he could see no end to the trees and the leaves in any direction. His heart that had been lightened by the sight of the sun and the feel of the wind sank back into his toes. There was no food to go back to down below. Actually, as I have told you, they were not far off the edge of the forest, and if Bilbo had the sense to see it, the tree that he had climbed, though it was tall in itself, was standing near the bottom of a wide valley, so that from its top the trees seemed to swell up to swell up all round like that at the edges of a great bowl, and he could not expect to see how far the forest lasted. Still he did not see this, and he climbed down full of despair. He got to the bottom again at last, scratched, hot, and miserable, and he could not see anything in the gloom below when he got there. His report soon made the others as miserable as he was. The forest goes the forest goes on forever and ever and ever in all directions. Whatever shall we do? And what is the use of sending a hobbit? They cried, as if it was his fault. They did not care They did not care tuppence about butterflies, and were only made more angry when he told them about of the beautiful breeze, which they were too heavy to climb up and feel. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. We'll continue the rest of this chapter, and then another set of 2 chapters for that because I'm starting to get tired, and I'm going to just go ahead and finish that. So we're going to finish the rest of this chapter and then read 2 more chapters for next time to make it sort of count as our 3 chapters, I guess. But yeah. So, and I don't like stopping in the middle of a chapter, but sometimes I gotta do that. So yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this this reading live stream. And I'm sorry for having to do it like this, but it has to be done. Tomorrow I will be either doing a live reaction to, if not a video reaction to, the Mario Kart World Direct, which is only 15 minutes. So we'll see what we can. So I'll think about how to go about that in itself. But as alongside that, I don't know. When I next read a book, it will be the U.S. history book that I got here to kind of go along with taking turns of reading the book. So, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, even though it's a little bit of a short one. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is Forrest Walpole signing off.